All right, welcome back everybody. So when you think about it, one of the main things a program needs to be able to do is to store and manipulate data. Okay, that's when it comes down to it, that's what a program is. It's a storer and manipulator of data. So we need to talk about variables. How do you store and manipulate data in a program? Okay, well, the main way is to use what are called variables, which you remember are sort of like storage locations in your computer's memory. You can call them by a name, you can label them, and then you can store things there, you can recall things, you can combine them together, so you can do all sorts of neat stuff. Java is what's called a strongly typed computer language. That means when you make a variable, you have to specify right then and there, as soon as you make it, what kind of data it's going to hold. Okay, that's in contrast to other languages that we've learned, like Python or JavaScript, which you didn't need to do that for. You could store any kind of data in any variable. But Java is kind of picky about it. So when we make a variable, we're going to need to specify what kind of data it's going to hold. Okay, now there's several different data types of data that can be stored in Java. Let's start with the numerical ones. So there's two kinds of numbers that you can store. One is called an integer, and that's a whole number. The other is called a double, which is where you have a decimal. So let me show you the syntax for creating a variable. Let's say I have a variable called number, and I want it to be able to hold some integer whole number data. So the way to do that, the way to create the variable looks like this. So first I type the word int. Okay, that tells it what kind of data it's going to store. Int is short for integer. Then I type the name of the variable. So let's say the variable is called number. If it equals, remember an equals is like an assignment. It says set the variable number equal to this, or store the value in number, store this value in number. Let's say I make it 10. Notice I put the semicolon at the end of the line, so after every command in Java, you put a semicolon. Okay, so this line right here, line 3, this is how I create a variable. Oops. This is how I create a variable in Java. Variable called number, which is a place in memory. I label it with a label number, and I'm going to store the whole number, the integer 10 there. Okay, now let's just make sure it's there. So what I can do is I can put a print statement, actually a print line statement, that's probably nicer. So remember our notation, our syntax for print line statements, capital S system, print line. Now in addition to putting a string there, I can just put a variable like number, semicolon, and that will print out the value of number to the screen. So let's make sure it contains 10. So let me run it. It does its thing, and on the right here, you see it pops out with 10. Okay, so that confirms that I have that value stored in 10. Okay, now the other kind of number that you can store is what's called a double, which stores decimals. We call it a double. That seems kind of like a funny name. There's also a floating point, decimal point floats in the position in the number. Double is short for double precision, so it's a more accurate version of a float or floating point number, or decimal number. So although you could use float, most people use double by default because it just makes it a lot more accurate. So let's say I make a double, a decimal number, double precision number, double precision decimal number. So call it, say, number 2. And let's store, how about 3.14 pi. So we can store any kind of decimal number in number 2. It's a double. So I start with, remember, syntax. I start with the type of variable. It's going to be double. So that's the kind of data it's going to hold. Put the variable name next, number 2. And then equals the assignment operator. So I'm saying store the value in number 2. And what value am I going to store? 3.14. So let's print it out and make sure it's working. I have another system out print line statement. I'm going to print out number 2 this time, end it with a semicolon. All right, so let's run it and let's make sure it prints out. So it runs, First is going to print out just number, which is 10, and then there's our 3.14. Okay, so ints and doubles are the two main numerical types.